My name is Anna. I am 29 years old. I live with my husband, Oliver, and our 3 daughters. At first glance, my life seems calm and settled. However, there are many memories and experiences inside me that still cast a shadow over my present. My childhood and youth were spent in a family that, from the outside, seemed strong and united. But behind this facade was the alienation and silent emptiness that surrounded me from an early age. I always felt like a stranger in my own family, as if I were an invisible observer, not a part of it. Despite the fact that we had shared dinners and family holidays, the feeling of isolation never left me. I was shy and withdrawn. At school, I tried my best to stand out, but it was difficult. Unlike my older sister Naomi, who easily won people's hearts with her beauty and charm, I always stayed in the shadows. Her parents invariably preferred her. I often saw them buying her new hair accessories or dresses, asking for my opinion only to later ask me to give in to her preferences. In such small things, which accumulated over the years, their favoritism manifested itself, and it became unbearable. Naomi, although she was my sister, never sought intimacy. Moreover, her attitude towards my attempts to get closer was cold, sometimes even cruel. At school, she did everything so that we didn't communicate, as if she was embarrassed by my presence. This emotional distance only increased over the years, and by the time I graduated from high school, I made the decision to leave home forever. Naomi got everything she could have dreamed of. She studied at an expensive private college, where my parents could hardly send her. But there were no barriers for them when it came to her well-being. I, with my modest plans, remained on the margins of their attention. When my parents once asked me to help with the money, despite years of neglect, I couldn't stand it. That day, I snapped, declaring my independence for the first time, and announced that I was leaving home forever. This led to a loud quarrel with my father, his angry cries and statements that I was dead to him. I left with a minimum amount of things and small savings earned from part-time jobs. Feelings of fear and determination were fighting inside me. But most of all, I felt relieved. There was an unknown ahead, but I already knew that I would not go back. My new life began in the city, where I got a job right after graduating from high school. It was far from the most prestigious position, but the staff turned out to be kind and responsive. The work was satisfying, and every day I felt needed. In this new world, I met Oliver. At first, our conversations were simple, barely perceptible greetings. He worked for one of the companies with which my building signed a cleaning contract. His calmness, openness, and benevolence attracted me from the very beginning. Over time, our casual meetings began to develop into small conversations. Oliver was attentive, and his warm smile always warmed my heart. One day, after one of these meetings, he invited me to dinner. I didn't hesitate for a long time. I accepted his invitation without hesitation. Despite deep doubts about reconnecting with my parents, I decided to dial their number to tell them the good news about my upcoming wedding to Oliver. It was a difficult decision. The memories of our last conversation are still fresh in my memory, their indifference, the cold reception of my decision to leave home. But part of me still hoped that the importance of this event could melt the ice between us. When my father answered the phone, his voice sounded unexpectedly distant. There was no hint of joy or curiosity. I barely had time to share the news, as his answer cut off all hope, dry and indifferent, as if the fact that I was going to get married was something insignificant, almost uninteresting. This silent disregard, his complete indifference to my happiness, pierced me. I hung up the phone, unable to continue the conversation. Tears welled up on my face by themselves, reminding me of the wound that had not healed over all these years. Oliver, as always sensitive to my mood, noticed the change in me. He came over, gently touching my back, and his presence immediately brought a little peace. I shared with him the disappointment of the phone call, of the piercing pain that came with my father's voice. Oliver listened attentively without interrupting, his words of comfort flowing like a warm stream. He assured me that I was no longer alone, that I had him and his family, who would always be there, ready to support and accept me for who I am. His parents, with their unconditional kindness and warmth, became a real family for me, the one I had been looking for so long. Hugging Oliver, I suddenly realized that in his arms is my new life, my support and my strength. I was no longer lonely, as I had been when I was a child. Now I had someone who always understood and supported me, and whose family sincerely rejoiced at our every moment of happiness. I decided to focus on these positive aspects of my life, putting aside the pain of parental alienation. Several years have passed. Oliver and I were over the moon when our first daughter was born. In her eyes, I saw a reflection of the love and warmth that bound us. Our life was full of joy and satisfaction. Each new day brought us something special, something that reminded us that despite the pain of the past, we were happy. Oliver's family accepted me as their own, and their kindness and care warmed me more than my own family ever could. And then, one day, there was an unexpected phone call from my father. I hesitated before answering, afraid of more reproaches or another indifference. But this time his voice sounded unusually cheerful. I shared with him the news about how things were going, told him about our daughter, but to my surprise, he showed no interest. My news about the birth of his granddaughter was ignored, as if I was talking about something unimportant. It was shocking, but I held back, not showing my true emotions. Then the father suddenly moved on to another topic. Naomi is getting married. Her fiancé is a successful businessman, the owner of several companies, and this news was presented with such triumph, as if nothing else mattered. I listened to him, inwardly preparing for what would come next. As expected, my father invited me to the wedding, which was to take place in 2 months. He talked about her with more enthusiasm than he had ever talked about my own wedding. Only Oliver's family was celebrating with us at the time. My parents didn't even show up. My father stressed that my absence from Naomi's wedding would be awkward, especially if other relatives noticed it. His words sounded like an order, not a request. I felt a growing sense of resentment inside. Anyway, I knew that this wedding was more important to him than my happiness. Despite all my reservations, a sense of duty and a heightened understanding of my role in this family drama made me decide to attend. Our daughter was still a little girl, and I decided to leave her in Oliver's care so that I could attend the wedding myself, although conflicting emotions raged inside me. Before the meeting my father mentioned, I was thinking about the best place to spend time with my sister. Initially, I planned to meet in the cozy cafe of the hotel to avoid awkwardness and turmoil. However, as I was walking through the spacious lobby, among the sparkling chandeliers and the quiet noise of busy guests, I suddenly noticed a familiar figure. It was Naomi. She stood with her back to me, seemingly unaware of my approach. When our eyes met, her eyes widened in surprise, as if my presence was the last thing she expected. Naomi looked at me with slight suspicion, as if she wasn't sure if I was really here. She almost immediately asked me what I was doing here, as if my appearance was not only unexpected, but also unwelcome. I hurried to congratulate her on her upcoming wedding, wanting to avoid unnecessary conflicts. But there was a certain puzzlement in her eyes. "I asked Dad not to invite you," she said softly, as if it was something taken for granted. At that moment, it became quite clear. My father invited me only to maintain visibility, to show my family and friends that everything was in order. Disappointment was growing inside me, mixed with a feeling of unbearable dejection. I couldn't understand why I was being ignored and rejected so much, even after I made an effort to come here, despite my own doubts. I didn't even receive a formal invitation to this wedding, but I came anyway. It was my attempt to reconnect with my family, at least for a moment, but it seems to have been useless. I decided it wasn't worth my time and energy. With the thought that my daughter was staying at home with her husband, I went up to Naomi, intending to say goodbye politely, but then she suddenly remembered my existence. "By the way, Anna," she said, almost lazily, "you're married too, aren't you? And what does your husband do?" Her voice sounded slightly dismissive, as if my life was insignificant in her eyes. When I mentioned that Oliver works in a cleaning business, her face took on an expression of quiet mockery. "Dirty work," she scoffed, as if finding something humiliating about it. "I wonder how your house is there. It must not be too clean," she added with a contemptuous tone. Her words sparked anger in me, which I tried to suppress for a long time. I couldn't take these subtle insults and constant attempts to belittle me anymore. With fury in my voice, I declared that I was happy in my life, and stressed that I no longer wanted any interference from either her or my father. I said it decisively, but Naomi just grinned coldly. "We're strangers now, Anna, and that's not going to change." Her words sounded like a final verdict. She turned away, and I, feeling depressed and broken, ran out of the hotel without looking back. My makeup was ruined by tears and blurred shadows, a vivid reminder of a short, only 30-minute meeting that brought me only pain and disappointment. And this is after a 2-hour trip, for what? When I returned home, Oliver and our daughter greeted me with warmth and understanding. My husband immediately felt the ordeal I had to go through. He hugged me tightly, reminding me in a whisper that I belong only to them, that my family is here now, next to him and our children. Years have passed, and our family has grown. I gave birth to 2 more daughters, and our life was filled with new joy and troubles. After the birth of my first daughter, I quit my job for a while, but returned a few years later, this time to work at the same cleaning company as Oliver. One day, during a routine cleaning in the office, I came up with the idea of creating a new cleaning tool that could make life easier for housewives. I shared this idea with the management, and, to my surprise, the project was enthusiastically accepted. We have developed a tool that, being created from the point of view of a housewife, turned out to be incredibly successful. Our business flourished, and soon our product attracted attention both on the internet and in various magazines. The demand exceeded all our expectations, and we decided to expand the business by creating a subsidiary company for the production and sale of cleaning products. To my great surprise, I was elected CEO of the new company. Support from all sides has helped the company grow to incredible heights. In a few years, our business has turned into an empire with a turnover of $40 million, and despite all the responsibility and a busy schedule, I have learned to harmoniously combine work and household chores. My husband and daughters have always stood by my side, creating an atmosphere in which I could continue to move forward, maintaining a balance between career and family. Our life was eventful, but happy, filled with love, success, and support. However, everything changed after one TV story that seemed to be just a brief episode in my life. A 10-minute interview appeared on the screens, where I talked about my path to success and about creating a product that has become a symbol of our prosperity. The story aroused great interest. In a matter of hours, the mailbox was filled with requests from potential partners and journalists, and my schedule became even more stressful. I felt like time was squeezing into a tight spring, forcing me to focus on every minute. And then one day, when I was in the office, I received a note with a callback number. I was expecting another interview request or business proposal, but after reading the note, I was stunned. The number was from my sister Naomi. Despite the fact that I blocked her and her parents after that scandalous incident at the wedding, she found a way to contact me. The fact that she chose this moment, after my appearance on television, left no doubt about her intentions. My heart was filled with anxiety and irritation. Why now? Why, when I finally built my life without them? Reluctantly, I dialed her number. Naomi answered casually, as if our last conversation had never happened, and her lightness made me even more wary. Without hiding my irritation, I immediately asked why she decided to resume communication. Her response was as perfunctory as ever. She noted my recent financial success and offered to help them. I couldn't help but grin. She asked me exactly what my help was and why she needed my support. Naomi, without flinching, explained that their business with her husband was not going so well, and that with my financial support they could restore their position. My anger flared up like a flame. I reminded her of how she had been dismissive of my marriage and life in the past, how she and my father had easily ignored me for so many years. Naomi, instead of showing at least a drop of remorse, accused me of thinking too much about the past. She interrupted me with annoyance, saying that my gloomy memories were preventing us from moving forward. I was stunned by her audacity. My patience was exhausted. I coldly and clearly made it clear that my family is now my husband and our daughters, and that they no longer have any place in my life. Despite my sister's protests, I ended the conversation, deciding for myself that this was the end. I hoped I'd never hear from her or my parents again. But to my surprise, it turned out to be just the beginning. A few days later, my parents and Naomi showed up at the door of my office. My receptionist looked worried, but my father insisted that he needed to talk to me. Not wanting to make a scene at work, I decided it was better to continue the conversation at home. After contacting Oliver, we agreed to meet them at our place in the evening. When both families gathered, tension filled the air. I did not hide my suspicions and, taking the initiative into my own hands, bluntly said that they probably came to ask for money. My statement drew scornful chuckles. My father and Naomi said that our family ties entitled them to a share of my success, as if everything I had achieved owed it to them. Naomi's husband, the very successful businessman, as they said, added with an arrogant smile that with my financial help he could run the business more efficiently than me. His self-confidence was amazing. He seemed completely confident of his superiority and had no doubt that I would immediately agree to their demands. My resolve remained unshakable. I firmly stated that the only bond we have is blood, and that's not enough to make me help those who have always been strangers to me, despite the family ties. Before I could continue, my husband, as always confident and calm, put his hand on my shoulder. Standing next to me, he said in a firm but gentle voice that I no longer had to be a part of their lives. Anna has already found her real family, he said, looking directly at my parents and sister, and she doesn't need separated relatives to be happy. Oliver's words sounded like a challenge, not so much hostile as peremptory. He looked at them with unshakable confidence that our family is strong and indestructible. My sister's response was immediate. She burst into sarcastic comments, laughing contemptuously at the fact that my husband was just a cleaner. "It's such a dirty job," she said mockingly. "Surrounded by trash every day, isn't that right, Oliver?" But my husband, restrained and balanced, did not succumb to her sharp words. He only replied even more confidently and calmly, "Yes, my job is to keep it clean. And it benefits people. But you're wrong if you think that cleaning is all I do." With these words, he revealed the truth that shocked my family. I am the CEO of the parent company that owns Anna's business. Their attempts to belittle him failed. My sister froze, her eyes widened in surprise. "CEO?" she managed to say, stunned by how easily she had missed this fact. I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter but liberating laugh burst out of my chest. My parents and sister looked at us as if for the first time they realized who we had become. "When Oliver and I got married, he wasn't the CEO," I added, enjoying their confusion. "But he grew up in his father's business and earned his position. This is the result of his hard work, not your expectations." My sister's face turned red from humiliation. But before she could answer, Oliver continued, "If your husband is such a great businessman, why does he need our financial help?" His words sounded like the final blow from which they could not recover. For the first time in all this time, the sister and her husband did not find the words to answer. They tried to say something, but their voices were shaking and the words stuck in their throats. I took a deep breath, feeling confident inside, and clearly stated, "This is the last time we talk. If you make a scene, I'll call the police. We are quite comfortable being strangers." My words sounded final. Oliver stood in front of me like a wall, protecting our future from what had once been my past life. My parents and sister realized that they had been defeated. They left without saying another word. Later, when we were alone, Oliver shared the unexpected news. It turned out that his father's company had been cooperating with a firm owned by my son-in-law for a long time. But after everything that happened, Oliver decided to sever these ties. A few days later, my brother-in-law tried to apologize, but my husband was adamant. And, as it turned out, this gap was a fatal blow for their business. They lost partners, which led to bankruptcy and huge debts. My sister and her husband were on the brink of financial ruin. My father, who was used to living on their money, retired prematurely without thinking about the consequences, and now, at his age, He could not find a new job. Their lives were bursting at the seams. My parents were constantly fighting, their marriage was on the verge of collapse. And my sister, faced with a divorce, returned to her parents' house, where she barely made ends meet. On the other hand, our family was thriving. I continued to work part-time at my company, and Oliver was involved in business management. Our daughters grew up surrounded by love and care. We decided to take a well-deserved vacation, a long family vacation to spend time together and enjoy each other. I was sitting in my office, looking out the window at the autumn sky, and I felt incredibly grateful for everything we had. Happiness is not something random, it is the result of the choices we make every day. And I intended to appreciate this happiness every minute, every day, next to those who are really important.